Hey everyone, and welcome to Learn with MSA. We're about to jump into a really cool concept in programming that's going to make your code so much cleaner and smarter. If you haven't subscribed yet, please hit that subscribe button and definitely let us know in the comments what you think of the video. All right, let's get into it. So, let me ask you something. Have you ever been coding and just wished you could use one simple name for a function, even if you needed it to do slightly different things? It can get messy having a bunch of similar function names, right? Well, it turns out there's a super elegant way to handle exactly that. And that feature is called overloading. Basically, it lets you have multiple methods or constructors that share the exact same name. The secret sauce? The compiler can tell them apart just by looking at the parameters you give them. Think of it like a Swiss Army knife. One tool, but with lots of different specialized functions. It's awesome. Okay, let's see how this actually works. And we'll start with constructors. That special method that runs whenever you create a new object. Overloading them gives us a ton of flexibility right from the moment an object is born. So, imagine you're making an app for a school. You need to create profiles for students. But here's the thing about real-world data. It's messy. Sometimes you get a student's name and age. Other times, all you have is a name. And sometimes you just need to create an empty placeholder profile. How do you deal with all that without writing a ton of confusing if statements? Well, the solution is actually super clean. We just create 3 different constructors for our student class. One takes 0 arguments, that's for our placeholder. Another one just takes a name, and the third one takes both the name and the age. It's the same name, student, but it gives us 3 different ways to build that object. And here's what that looks like in the code. See that first constructor, student with empty parentheses? If we call that, it just sets up a default student with the name unknown and age 0. The second one takes a name, so it sets the name we provide, but keeps the age at a default of 0. And finally, the third one lets us provide all the info right up front. This is great because it guarantees our objects are always created in a valid state no matter what info we start with. So you might be wondering, how does Java not get confused? Well, it's not magic. It's just really smart pattern matching. When you write new student parentheses, the compiler looks at what's inside the parentheses. It checks the number of arguments and their data types. Is it empty? Is it one string? Or is it a string and an integer? It then finds the one and only one constructor that has that exact signature. It's a perfect match every single time. All right, so we've seen how to build objects with more flexibility. Now let's take that same idea and apply it to the things our objects can do. This is method overloading. One name, but for a whole bunch of related tasks. Let's use a super simple example. A calculator. You obviously need an add method. But wait, are you adding whole numbers like integers? Or are you adding decimal numbers like doubles? And what if you need to add 2 numbers sometimes, but 3 numbers other times? You really don't want to create clunky method names like add 2ints and add 3ints. That would be a nightmare. And yup, you guessed it, overloading to the rescue. We just create 3 methods, all called add. The compiler is smart enough to figure out which one you mean. If you give it 2 integers, it calls the first one. 3 integers, it calls the second. And if you give it decimals, it knows to call the third one. The same simple verb, add, now handles all these different scenarios. So clean. And this code shows the 2 ways you can overload perfectly. If you compare the first and second methods, they're both called add, but one takes 2 integers and the other takes 3. That's overloading by changing the number of parameters. Now look at the first and third methods. They both take 2 parameters, but their data types are different. One takes integers, the other takes doubles. Both ways are totally valid and incredibly useful. Okay, so we've built our student class and our calculator class. We've defined all our overloaded constructors and methods. Now for the payoff. Let's jump into the main method and see this all work together in a real program. And here it is in action. When we create S1 with nothing in the parentheses, boom, Java calls our default constructor. When we create S2 and pass in the string Ali, it knows to use the constructor that takes just a name. And for S3, with a string and an integer, it finds the perfect match again. The code is just so readable and makes perfect sense. It's the exact same story with our add method. We pass in 2 integers, and Java calls the addInt int version. We pass in 3, and it correctly switches to the 3-parameter version. And as soon as we use decimals, it knows to call the version that handles doubles. As the programmer, all you have to think is add. The compiler does all the heavy lifting to figure out the details. That's what makes this so powerful. So, we've seen how cool and useful this is. To wrap things up, let's just lock in a couple of golden rules. If you can remember these, you'll be a pro at overloading and you'll avoid the common traps. All right, here's the absolute #1 rule. To overload a method, you have to change the parameter list, period. You can either change the number of parameters, like we did with our add method, or you can change the data type of the parameters. But, and this is a big one that trips people up, you cannot overload a method just by changing what it returns. The return type doesn't matter to the compiler for this. This slide makes it crystal clear. On the left, we've got valid overloading. Both methods are called add, but one takes a single int and the other takes two. Their parameter lists are different, so it works. Perfect. But look at the right side. This is an error. Even though one returns void and the other returns an int, their parameter lists are identical. They both just take one int. The compiler sees this and has no idea which one you mean, so your code won't even compile. Remember that, and you're good to go. And that's our look at overloading in Java. It's a really fundamental concept that just makes your code more intuitive, more flexible, and honestly, just better. If this helped you out, please do subscribe to our channel for more deep dives like this one. Thanks so much for watching.